Welcome to the Dream Novel channel. Before starting to listen to the fun in this clip, don't forget to like and comment, so that the admin will have the encouragement to continue making clips. Let's go listen. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 136, New Ideas, Exploding Bonbons. Before long, Cedric and Cho arrived one after the other, and the compartment became lively. Everyone was thrilled to see each other again after 2 months. Kyle couldn't be sure, but Cho seemed taller than before. As soon as she entered, she set a large package on the table filled with snacks she'd brought from the Muggle world. She thought Kyle, Cedric, and Conna, who all came from pure wizarding families, might not be familiar with Muggle snacks, so she had carefully picked out what she thought were the tastiest options for them to try. Everyone was quite interested in what she'd brought. Cedric took a liking to a black fizzy drink. Though a bit odd at first, he quickly found that its unique texture was even better than pumpkin juice, giving him a strange sense of delight. If he didn't know it was a Muggle drink, he'd have thought it had an elixir to induce euphoria mixed in. Conna was particularly fond of the triangular corn chips and the berry-filled cookies. Midway through the snacking, Fred, George, and Lee Jordan popped by, immediately taking a liking to a kind of candy that popped and fizzed in their mouths. "I just had a fantastic idea," Fred said thoughtfully, licking the candy wrapper. "What if we created an exploding candy ourselves? And put it on Slytherin's table," George suggested with a grin. "That might keep Marcus Flint quiet for a bit. Found out he's Slytherin's Quidditch captain this year." "That might be tricky," Cedric said, shaking his head as he opened another bottle of fizzy cola. "Slytherins probably won't eat sweets from a suspicious source. What if we put them in the kitchen?" Lee Jordan pondered. "If they appear with the regular food, they wouldn't be suspect." "I wouldn't recommend it," Cedric said, frowning. "The house elves would never agree, and if anything went wrong, they'd be the ones in trouble." "Then let's forget that idea," Lee shrugged. "Or you could try something different," Kyle suggested. "Maybe candy that just pops in your mouth, and only explodes when you spit it out." Fred and George's eyes lit up at the same moment. In unison, they exclaimed, "Kyle, has anyone ever told you? You're a genius." Kyle raised an eyebrow. "Of course, plenty of people say that." Silence fell over the compartment as everyone looked at Kyle with expressions of mild disgust. Unbothered, Kyle continued eating a piece of chocolate. Through the train window, he spotted Neville, who was scanning the platform as if looking for something, while his grandmother stood beside him, sternly chastising him. Further off, he also saw Mrs. Weasley walking toward the train with 3 children in tow, Ron, Ginny, and a thin boy with round glasses, messy hair, and bangs cut unevenly to hide his forehead. "Mrs. Weasley." Kyle leaned out the window and waved. "Oh, dear, there you are." Mrs. Weasley hurried over. "Have you seen Fred and George?" "We're here, Mom," the twins called as they made their way to the car. After they'd left, Cho picked up a chocolate frog and looked at Kyle. "So, what were you up to over the summer holidays?" "I wrote you in August, but it took more than half a month for you to reply." Kyle gave an apologetic smile. "Well, something came up, and I had to take a long trip." In truth, he'd received her letter the day after arriving in Dorset, but between all the activities, mostly involving getting roughed up, he'd completely forgotten to write back. By the time he remembered, he was already back home. Cho didn't seem suspicious, she just assumed Kyle had been traveling, like Cedric. "I'm really envious," she said with a hint of wistfulness, nibbling on her chocolate frog. "I've always wanted to travel abroad, too. By the way, how was Paris?" She directed the question to Cedric. "It was wonderful," Cedric said after a moment's thought. "We went to the opera and even met an old wizard who immediately recognized us and shared stories about interesting places. If you're planning a trip there, I can draw you a map later." "That would be amazing," Cho said, surprised and delighted. "I've always wanted to go to Paris." "Did you visit Beauxbatons Academy of Magic, by any chance?" Yes, we did, Cedric nodded. But Bonbons isn't in Paris, it's down in the Pyrenees, as the old wizard told us. How was it? Cho asked, her curiosity piqued. We didn't go inside, just saw it from the outside, Cedric replied. It's a bit smaller than Hogwarts, but the buildings are more delicate and very beautiful. Cho's eyes sparkled with excitement. She had a weakness for beautiful architecture, especially if it was from a renowned magical school like Bonbons. As Cho and Cedric continued chatting, Kyle glanced out the window again. Mrs. Weasley was dabbing a handkerchief to clear some soot off Ron's nose. Meanwhile, the boy with glasses had vanished, and Percy was now standing beside her. George noticed Percy and suddenly frowned. Percy, why does your robe look different from ours? He gestured toward Percy's chest. They're all new robes, but why do I see a round badge there? Did Madame Malkin give you special treatment? That's a prefect badge, dear, Mrs. Weasley explained with a proud smile. So that's why you've been wearing it all summer? Fred said with exaggerated surprise. Good thing you didn't get the special award for services to the school. I think that one's a trophy, George added, grinning. You couldn't exactly pin it to your chest. But you could wear it on your head. Like a shiny gold hat. Fred and George shared a mischievous look, and, as if on cue, pulled out a small trophy from their robes and set it atop their heads, bowing to each other in an exaggerated imitation of Percy. Stop it. Percy turned red, looking furious. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 137. The sudden sound of banging on the door. Mrs. Weasley gave Fred and George a firm but gentle twist on their ears. If you two ever manage to win the special award for services to the school, you'll be carrying that trophy down Diagon Alley yourselves. Then she turned to Percy with a softer expression. All right, dear, I hope you have a good term. When you arrive, please send an owl with a letter for me. She kissed Percy on the cheek, and he walked off, his face faintly pink. Now it's your turn. Mrs. Weasley gave the twins a pointed look. I expect you two to behave this year, and don't even think about corrupting Kyle. Corrupt Kyle? Fred's voice rose in protest. Mum, are you joking? Not at all, Mrs. Weasley replied firmly. A whistle sounded as the train slowly began to move. Hurry now, get on board, and make sure you take care of Ron. Don't worry, Mum. Ron's perfectly safe with us, Fred assured her before he, George, and Ron scrambled onto the train. Kyle leaned out the window, waving. Bye, Mrs. Weasley. Goodbye, dear, Mrs. Weasley called back. And if they get into any trouble, write to me right away. With a rumble, the train picked up speed. Ginny ran alongside it, waving until they were out of sight, disappearing as the houses whizzed by. Kyle turned back to the compartment, settling into a game of wizard chess with Cedric, while Kanna and Cho huddled over a magazine, whispering conspiratorially. After one match, Cedric leaned over to see what they were reading, only to be playfully shooed away by Cho. With a good-natured sigh, he refocused on the chessboard for another couple of games. Then the compartment door slid open, and Fred and George burst in, visibly excited. Guess who we just ran into on the train? Cedric barely glanced up. Who could you possibly run into? It couldn't be Harry Potter. Fred's eyes widened. How did you know? Yes, it was Harry Potter. Cedric's hand froze mid-move, his surprise evident. Are you serious? I asked him myself, Fred confirmed, and I saw his scar. It was right there, like a bolt of lightning. Now intrigued, Cedric leaned back thoughtfully. That actually makes sense. Judging by his age, he'd be starting Hogwarts this year. The Dark Lord fell about 10 years ago, after all, so the timing fits. But do you think he remembers what the Dark Lord looked like? George asked curiously. Unlikely, Cedric replied. He was only a baby. How could he remember? That's true. Kyle chuckled. What's this, you're all curious about what the Dark Lord looked like? A bit, yeah, Fred admitted, lounging against the carriage wall. I mean, he's the Dark Lord, aren't you curious too? Not really, Kyle said with a shrug. He was just another powerful wizard, right? What's there to be curious about? For all we know, he didn't even have a nose. Fred burst out laughing. Oh, come on, that's impossible. No nose? Ridiculous. Kyle's joke had struck a chord, and Fred, along with the others, found it hilariously far-fetched. None of them believed in such absurdities. After a while of laughing, Cedric wiped his eyes and asked, "We'll be arriving at Hogwarts soon. Are we still selling maps this year?" "Absolutely," Fred replied, nodding enthusiastically. "This is serious business, worth more than 10 galleons. And we only get one chance each year, so there's no way we're missing it." "That's right," George agreed with a grin, casting a sly look at Kyle. "As older students, we simply can't stand by and let those innocent first years get lost." Kyle raised an eyebrow. That was clearly his line, and George had swiped it. "What's everyone's plan for now?" Cedric suggested. "If you're free, why not make the maps here?" The train ride to Hogwarts would still take hours, giving them plenty of time to produce a batch of maps. Cho and Kanna agreed without hesitation. They had nothing else to do, weren't keen on wizard chess, and liked the idea of doing something useful. Fred and George considered it and agreed too. Although they'd told Lee Jordan they'd join him in the Slytherin compartment to prank with his spider, they figured that compared to earning a stash of galleons, that could wait. All eyes turned to Kyle. "No objections here," Kyle shrugged. "Since we're all in, let's clear the table. We'll need space for the parchment with all these snacks lying around." At that, everyone jumped up and started packing away the snacks on the table. Kyle took this chance to grab 2 stacks of parchment from his box. The thicker stack was standard scholarly parchment, sold in packs of 10 for a sicko, with discounts for larger bundles. Kyle pulled out around 70 or 80 sheets. The other stack was much smaller, with only a dozen sheets of higher quality parchment, soft, pristine, and bordered with golden threads at the top and bottom. This was real gold, not the cheap paint they'd used the previous year, and each sheet cost a full galleon. Kyle set both stacks, along with the original map, on the table. "Well then, what are we waiting for? Let's get started." The group simultaneously reached for the regular parchment, each grabbing a dozen sheets. Seeing their quick reflexes, Kyle sighed. "You all have a real knack for taking the easy option, don't you?" While everyone's doubling charm would do the job, his more expensive stack required a bit of decorative work and added detailing, making it much more time-consuming. He'd been polite in offering first choice, but he hadn't expected everyone to snatch up the easier task. If he'd known, he would have chosen first himself. Kyle sighed again, thinking how, thanks to the Weasley twins, even Cedric and Kanna had picked up some sly habits. Those 2 brothers were a bad influence, no doubt. With a resigned sigh, Kyle pulled out his wand and tapped it on the parchment. Geminio. The map lines gradually appeared on the blank parchment. This time, Kyle estimated he could stretch the doubling charm to last through the entire semester. Soon, the compartment was bustling with activity. Blank sheets turned into maps one by one, with each of them focused on duplicating as quickly as possible. Bang! Suddenly, a loud knock echoed from outside, right against their compartment door. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 138, You Want to Blackmail Me? Bang! The compartment door shook violently as it was struck from the outside, causing the door frame to creak with a teeth-grating noise. Kyle, focused on maintaining the doubling charm, was startled and accidentally jerked his wrist upward. SSH. A long tear appeared on the map he'd just finished duplicating. Kyle stared at the ruined map, his eye twitching. That was a whole galleon wasted. The others were similarly rattled by the sudden noise. Fred, who'd just completed his own doubling charm, accidentally stamped the map's image directly onto George's brand new robe. By Merlin's beard. This was my new robe, just bought this year. George exclaimed, inspecting the map print now adorning his sleeve with dismay. Kyle, is there any way to remove this? Of course there is, and it's very simple, Kyle replied coolly, glancing at the door. Through the glass, he could see 3 boys standing outside in the corridor. That Harry Potter, giving up Malfoy's friendship for that miserable Weasley. Utterly foolish, just like his parents, ungrateful, Draco Malfoy sneered to himself, punctuating his words with another slam against the neighboring compartment door. And that Weasley, grumbled Goyle, Malfoy's burly sidekick, nursing his sore fingers. That scrawny rat of his actually bit me. I'll make him pay. Despite his thick-set frame and stump-like appearance, Goyle's scowl had a bit of intimidation to it. Don't worry, Goyle. There'll be time enough, Malfoy assured him, rubbing his wrist and sneering coldly. My father's on the school board, and once we're at Hogwarts, I'll have plenty of ways to make them regret today. Straightening his slightly tousled hair, Malfoy turned to leave with Crabbe and Goyle, intending to join the other Slytherins. But before he could take a step, the adjacent compartment door swung open. Hold it right there, gentlemen, Kyle said, stepping into the doorway, his face expressionless as he looked over the 3 boys. His gaze settled on the pale-faced boy at the center. After a brief pause, Kyle asked, You were the one who slammed the door just now, weren't you? Yes, that was me. Malfoy, caught off guard, quickly recovered his composure. My name is Draco Malfoy, and I apologize if I disturbed you. Though his words and posture were polite, the arrogant glint in Malfoy's eyes was unmistakable, particularly when he introduced himself. Kyle, unfazed by Malfoy's smugness, replied evenly, Your apology is noted. Here's the thing, if you compensate us for the damage you caused, we'll call it even. Damage? Malfoy's face briefly registered surprise before he spotted Fred and George standing just behind Kyle. Instantly, his polite facade evaporated, replaced by a sneer. Red hair. It's the Weasleys again, with their band of freak friends, he muttered in disdain. Without a word, he reached into his pocket, tossed a galleon at Kyle, and said with a smirk, Keep the change. Oh, and just in case you didn't know what it looks like, it's a galleon. As Malfoy moved to leave, Kyle's hand reached out, blocking his path. Wait. Kyle said calmly, shaking the galleon in his hand lightly. This isn't enough. Malfoy paused, clenched his teeth, and angrily tossed another galleon in Kyle's direction, his throw forceful, as if he wished the coin itself could drive Kyle away. But Kyle caught it with ease and shook his head. Sorry, still not enough. Don't push it. Malfoy's face flushed with anger. If you keep harassing me, I'll tell my father you're extorting me. He's on the Hogwarts Board of Governors, he has the power to get you expelled. Kyle raised an eyebrow. I think you might be mistaken. I'm a well-behaved student who's earned the special award for services to the school. I would never stoop to blackmail. I'm simply requesting fair compensation for the damage caused. Even the Board of Governors or the Minister of Magic couldn't object to that. Special award for services to the school. Malfoy scoffed, then paused as something clicked. Wait, are you that new student, Kyle? He recalled that his father had mentioned a first year who'd won the special award for services to the school, a rare achievement, though he hadn't given much thought to it before now. To be precise, you're the first year. I'm a second year, Kyle corrected him smoothly. Now, back to the compensation. Malfoy scowled, calculating his options. He didn't know the specifics of Kyle's demands, but given that Kyle was associating with the Weasleys, he assumed they were far from wealthy. In his mind, 2 galleons was already more than generous. But he felt a growing sense of intimidation as he looked at the group of 6 standing in the compartment, all second years or older, while he only had Crabbe and Goyle beside him, both fresh-faced first years like himself. They didn't stand a chance in a scuffle. How much do you want? Malfoy muttered through gritted teeth, resigned to paying his way out. Kyle thought for a moment, then replied, "Not much. 200 galleons. Including what you've already paid, that leaves 198 galleons due." 200 galleons. Malfoy's face turned pale as he yelled, "That's outrageous. Not happening. Relax, I can break down the math for you." Kyle began. "I don't want to hear it." Malfoy's face had gone crimson with fury. He yanked out his wand and pointed it straight at Kyle. "This is extortion. You're blackmailing me, plain and simple." 200 galleons was an absurd amount, more than most Ministry of Magic employees earned in a month. To Malfoy, it didn't matter how many times he'd banged on their door, he wouldn't even owe that much if he'd barged in and hexed a lot of them. He might have wealth, but he wasn't foolish enough to part with 200 galleons over something so trivial. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 139, The Bottom Line of a Conscientious Shop. Malfoy glared at Kyle with fury, his wand raised. Without another word, he cast Locomotor Mortis. Aiming the Leglocker curse at Kyle, Malfoy hoped to immobilize him just long enough to make a quick escape and find the protection of his fellow Slytherins. But Kyle reacted just as quickly. "Protego," he called, a transparent shield appearing before him, deflecting Malfoy's spell right back. The next moment, Malfoy, who had turned to flee, was struck by his own spell. Plop. He toppled forward, landing on the floor with his legs locked together, groaning in frustration. Crabbe and Goyle finally grasped what was happening. Seeing Malfoy down, they lunged at Kyle, fists clenched. Fred and George moved to intercept them, but Kyle swiftly tossed a few licorice candies their way. Mid-air, the candies transformed into slender ropes, wrapping tightly around Crabbe and Goyle, leaving them unable to move. "Stop!" came a furious shout from down the corridor, where a group of older Slytherin students were approaching, scowling. The commotion had drawn a crowd, and among the onlookers were several Slytherins glaring at Kyle and his friends. "Kyle, how dare you bully our first years?" one of them accused, stepping forward protectively as he glanced at Malfoy, assuming he was one of their own. This was Draco Malfoy, after all, it was obvious he'd be sorted into Slytherin. The fourth year leading the group raised his wand without hesitation. Levi Corpus. Protego. Kyle's shield flickered up again, deflecting the spell. But the older Slytherin, more experienced than Malfoy, sidestepped the rebounded spell. Kyle, holding back his friends, raised his voice to ensure the gathered students heard him clearly. "I see your underhanded attacks, but I accept your challenge nonetheless." The older Slytherin sneered. "Challenge you? That's a joke. You were just lucky to save some failure last year, which is the only reason you got that special award for services to the school. Don't fool yourself into thinking you're special. Anyone who dares challenge Slytherin will pay the price." He lifted his wand again, clearly eager to teach Kyle a lesson. Kyle, with a hint of admiration in his gaze, gave him a silent thumbs up. This guy actually had the guts to insult Konna as a failure in front of a crowd, a blatant insult to Snape's own kin. With courage like this, it was almost a shame he wasn't in Gryffindor. But despite his grudging respect, Kyle wasn't about to just stand by. Raising his wand, he cast two quick spells. Spungify, followed by Levi Corpus. The older Slytherin tried to raise a shield charm to deflect, but as his feet unexpectedly softened and slipped beneath him, he stumbled. The half-formed shield charm fizzled, and Kyle's Levi Corpus hit him squarely. In an instant, he was yanked off his feet, suspended upside down from the train's ceiling. To his horror, a long, sharp needle-like object hovered just inches from his eyes, seemingly appearing out of nowhere. "I advise you not to move," Kyle said calmly, "or you'll be spending your first day of school in the hospital wing." The Slytherin hanging from the ceiling remained completely still, his eyes fixed in terror on the sharp needle in front of him, not daring to even breathe. Satisfied, Kyle turned to the stunned Malfoy. "So, are we ready to have a civil conversation?" "I'm not afraid of you," Malfoy said, though his voice quivered. "If this is blackmail, I'll tell Professor Snape. I already explained, it's a fair claim, Kyle replied, setting a stack of damaged maps on the floor. There were 10 in total, all made from high-quality parchment threaded with gold. Picking one up, he pointed to a long, visible tear running across it. Because you banged on the door, it disrupted my charm, ruining the maps I'd just completed. I'm requesting compensation, nothing unreasonable. They're not worth 200 galleons. Malfoy protested angrily. They're just a few pieces of parchment. The 2 galleons I gave you already should cover it 10 times over. No, Kyle said, holding a map up to Malfoy's face. Look closely. This parchment alone costs 1 galleon. The intricate design at the top. That's woven from unicorn hair. And those gems lining the border? Fire crab shell fragments. Each of these maps is worth quite a lot, so the 200 galleons is practically wholesale price. Behind Kyle, Cedric and the others fought to keep straight faces, all biting their lips to suppress their grins. Malfoy, meanwhile, looked taken aback. He reached out to touch the map, recognizing the unicorn hair pattern by its distinctive feel. His family owned a tapestry made from unicorn tail hair, and this felt identical. Kyle wasn't lying, the materials were genuinely valuable. Malfoy's confidence faltered. Then, why not just use a mending charm, he stammered. A simple spell will fix it. If you don't know how, I can, mending charm. Are you serious? Kyle interrupted, his tone suddenly indignant. Malfoy recoiled at the unexpected outburst. Yes. Why, is that a problem? Kyle fixed him with a stern gaze. Do you understand what it means to sell a high-end product? It means not a single flaw is acceptable, not even the slightest crease, let alone a long tear like this. Seeing Malfoy's bewildered expression, Kyle continued, and in our line of work, integrity is everything. Selling repaired goods as new. That's unthinkable. Our shop stands by its reputation, we'd never sell a product that's been patched up, no matter how perfect the repair. It's a principle of an honest business, and it's a responsibility to every customer who trusts us. Kyle spoke with righteous indignation, and Malfoy, sitting there bewildered, somehow found himself swayed. Even the Slytherins around them, who had been watching with hostility, listened in a daze. Gradually, some of their animosity toward Kyle faded, and instead, they glanced at Malfoy with a mix of curiosity and judgment. After a moment of silence, with everyone's eyes on him, Malfoy finally looked up and said, 200 galleons, right? That's correct, Kyle replied with a nod. Without another word, Malfoy removed a badge from his collar and handed it to Kyle along with his wallet. I only brought 150 galleons this trip, so I'll send the rest in a few days. This 100 galleon Quidditch Championship commemorative badge can serve as collateral. Malfoy hadn't wanted to seem as if he was giving in to blackmail, but now that the misunderstanding was cleared up, he felt justified. 200 galleons was a hefty amount, but nothing his family wouldn't provide with a quick letter home. Kyle took Malfoy's wallet but, after a brief look at the badge, handed it back with a neutral expression. Keep the collateral, he said evenly. I trust the Malfoy family wouldn't dishonor themselves by failing to keep their word. Malfoy puffed out his chest, his expression softening. His opinion of Kyle had improved. No wonder this student had received the special award for services to the school in his first year. Clearly, he had an eye for quality. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 140, the trio's first meeting is not pleasant. After pocketing the money, Kyle lifted the leglocker curse from Malfoy and untied Crabbe and Goyle, who stumbled back to their places behind Malfoy, trembling. Their faces looked like rippling puddles, clearly rattled, yet staying put out of loyalty to Malfoy. Malfoy, frowning with some disappointment at his lackey's poor display, lifted his head and addressed Kyle in a lofty tone. Once again, I apologize, Kyle. See you at school. His dignified tone and composed expression suggested well-bred confidence, though it was somewhat undercut by the dust and grime covering his robes. His earlier struggles had inadvertently polished the train compartment floor with his robe, even picking up a piece of Drobble's best-blowing gum on the hem. Kyle, noting the gum with mild amusement, chose to ignore it. For the sake of the 150 galleons, he overlooked these minor details and responded smoothly, "See you at school, Draco. I can already tell that Slytherin will be welcoming an exceptional new student this year." Malfoy's face practically glowed with restrained pride, as if he'd been given a large dose of elixir to induce euphoria. Though he'd heard similar words before, praise from Kyle, Hogwarts' youngest recipient of the special award for services to the school, felt far more sincere. However, Malfoy kept his cool, downplaying his pleasure. "Well, I still have a long way to go," he replied modestly. "You're the truly remarkable one. Few can earn that special award in their first year, not even Headmaster Dumbledore did." "Oh, don't say that. I was just lucky," Kyle replied with a smile, preparing to head back to his compartment. "Wait." Kyle turned back, curious. "Anything else?" "That map." Malfoy hesitated for a moment. "Could I place an order?" "Oh, right." Kyle feigned realization and handed Malfoy the damaged stack of maps. "Fess. Are all yours." "No, I don't mean those," Malfoy said, wrinkling his nose in distaste. "I'm interested in the high-end ones, the very best. Can I order one?" "I'd be happy to accommodate," Kyle replied with an even more genuine smile. "For an additional galleon, you can choose a custom pattern, say, your family crest, also in unicorn hair. And for 5 galleons more, you'll get a map with a lifelong enchantment, framed in an exquisite handmade case." Malfoy's eyes gleamed as he slowly closed his open palm into a fist. "I'll take it all." Kyle grinned, giving him a thumbs up. The Malfoys truly have impeccable taste. Draco Malfoy left with a smug smile, as if he'd just gained 200 galleons rather than lost it. What had started as a tense confrontation had somehow transformed into a cheerful business deal. The surrounding students, watching the scene with interest, saw nothing odd about it. If anything, they were simply amazed at the wealth on display. For most young witches and wizards, even 10 galleons was a considerable sum, enough to get them through a school term comfortably. 20 galleons. That was a luxury they couldn't even imagine. "By Merlin's beard," Ron muttered, poking his head out of a nearby compartment, his eyes wide with astonishment. "No wonder Fred and George are suddenly so flush with galleons. A map going for 20 galleons. That's practically highway robbery." Beside him, Harry stretched his neck to get a better view, though his curiosity lay elsewhere. "Who is that?" Harry asked, intrigued. "Who?" Ron looked confused. "The one talking to Malfoy." "Oh, that's Kyle," Ron replied eagerly. "He started last year and was top of his class. He even won the special award for services to the school, which is pretty amazing. That's better than Percy's prefect badge. My mum always says I should try to be like him, but honestly, it's impossible. I doubt even Bill and Charlie could match him." "Kyle, really?" Harry's voice grew louder in surprise. "You know him too?" Ron asked, surprised. Harry quickly shook his head. "No, not exactly. But Hagrid mentioned him. When he picked me up in Diagon Alley, he said that Kyle might end up as the youngest recipient of the Order of Merlin." "Oh my God, the Order of Merlin." Ron's eyes bulged in disbelief. Wow. I mean, I've never even heard of that happening. What exactly is the Order of Merlin?" Harry pressed, his curiosity piqued even further. Before Ron could respond, a high-pitched voice came from nearby. The Order of Merlin was founded in the Middle Ages by the greatest wizard of all time, Merlin himself. Over centuries, it's become the largest organization of esteemed wizards in the magical world. Only those who make significant contributions can receive the Order of Merlin medal, and it's the highest honor any witch or wizard can earn. Harry and Ron turned to see a young witch with thick, bushy brown hair, her head held high and her tone both proud and slightly challenging. I read about it in extra reference books, she added matter-of-factly, like a history of modern magical history and the great wizards of the 20th century. They all mention it. Of course I knew that, Ron mumbled, looking annoyed. This was his chance to impress Harry, and it had been stolen. Now the fun in this clip is over. Which listeners haven't liked and commented yet? You can press like and comment to encourage the admin find the fun in the next clip. May the listeners be happy forever.